Lynn Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Yes, speaking of City Paper, I was just looking at today's issue.
Oh, good. Glad someone is.
Yeah. Haven't had a chance to look. It's hot off the presses, just so you keep your eyes out.
In fact, that copy smells like newsprint. It's still got that newspaper.
Yeah, it does. Isn't that wonderful? Are you too young to remember mimeograph?
No. They had mimeographs.
Do you remember when they handed out mimeograph sheets hot off the mimeograph?
Yes.
All the kids would plaster them up against their nose.
And of course, we now know that stuff was carcinogenic.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
I'm just kidding, but I'm sure it was.
Well, it probably was.
Yeah.
Man, did that smell good. I wonder what that was. It was some chemical.
Yeah.
Oh,
mimeographs ran entirely on ecstasy-based ink. That's what people didn't realize. Millions of diagnoses of ADHD are now explained. Yeah.
All right, so Chris Potter's here. It's Wednesday. It's the 25th of July.
No, I don't think so. Is it?
It says so right there.
Oh yeah.
It's the 25th of July.
Okay. Oops. Well, I'm late for something.
So what? I have no credibility with you, huh?
No, I guess, I don't know.
You thought it was something else.
Well, I do have to say, you gave me some grief about coming in a minute late on Wednesday, and then my understanding is you forgot you had a show the day after? Am I understanding that correctly?
I didn't forget I had a show.
Yeah.
I merely was, I believe, drugged.
I see.
To a certain extent, and lost track
of time.
And I was failing to note the small hand on the.
Yeah.
And
that's the
I
one
was
you
thinking it was an hour earlier
than it actually was.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. All right.
That's what happened.
I just wanted to get that on the record.
In my decades and decades of broadcasting, that has never happened to me.
Really?
Yes.
I feel like it's happened here before, but
where I've been late?
Something.
You think?
Yeah.
Oh well, see, but here doesn't count.
Yeah, there we go. There's a tagline for the show. Tune into Lynn Cullen.
Okay.
It doesn't count.
Let's get serious.
So, yeah. It's weird here right now. The very fate of elections law in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, right.
Decided.
I mean, there's two trials I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
And well, you mentioned it. Let's get into it. And that is that in Harrisburg today is a trial in which the ACLU and other entities have taken the Commonwealth to court. Actually, the site for the trial is Applethwaite.
Yes. She's the lead. That's that 93-year-old woman from Philadelphia who's been voting in every election for umpteen years, but now can't get.
Why can't she get?
She doesn't have there were a bunch of. I think it was because she was born in another state where record keeping was not so great, and she can't get a copy of it. So
there's no way for her to prove she is who she is, and can't get a.
Right now, that's one of the wrinkles here, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Is the state has said, "Oh, but wait, just because you can't get a photo ID like we've been telling you need to get, we're going to have another super duper ID that will be easier to get." and all you'll need is like a social security number and a couple of documents showing you.
Well, now wait. All of a sudden they came up with this. This was not something they were advertising before.
This is something that they've started to talk about in recent days.
Okay, so they did. Well, when they rolled out this new law, then wasn't in there.
They didn't say really anything about it.
Okay, so they're just such.
And the problem is, and we noted this in a story today, and then also online last week. The state has already sent out letters to people who are on its list of the registered voters, but they don't seem to have photo IDs through the Department of Transportation. They've already sent out letters to these folks saying, "Oh, you've got to do this, da 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 da." And then there's a line in the letter that says, "Also, we're working on a process for getting ID if you can't do this." And it's like, so they've already sent out the letters, even though they can't really tell people everything about what it is they're supposed to do. It just has an amateur hour. Yes,
how rushed this is, how all it's about is suppressing the Democratic vote in advance of the presidential election. Yes. Now, get this. This is the thing that just blows me away.
You and I are about to have a disagreement, I can tell. Go ahead.
Because you know what this is?
I do. Go ahead, though. It's good. It's important.
Okay. The state of Pennsylvania has formally acknowledged that there have been absolutely zero reported voter fraud cases involving a person showing up at the polls and voting illegally.
Right.
Not a one. And they also admit, this is the Commonwealth here, that they don't suspect that that would change and that there would be any in November. So the state actually assigned a stipulation agreement. Mm-hmm. Oh, is the fact that the plaintiff signed it too that's a problem? No. Mm-hmm. Anyway, which acknowledges, quote, "There have been no investigations or prosecutions of in-person voter fraud in Pennsylvania. This is the reason that the law supposedly was needed." Okay, wait. And they further stipulate, and the parties do not have direct personal knowledge of any such investigation or prosecutions in other states.
Right.
Also, Pennsylvania, the state, prior to this trial that's going on right now, says it will not offer any evidence that in-person voter fraud has in fact occurred in Pennsylvania or is likely to occur in November, even if the voter ID law were not in place. Well, how is that not? That was the whole reason they had to pass the law. They said there was fraud. Now they're stipulating that there isn't. Now,
this is where we're going to disagree. So the irony of this is I set out a couple tweets about this last week, sort of making fun of this stipulation agreement. And all of a sudden, everybody else made a big deal out of it yesterday. And I suspect partly because of the upcoming, there was a protest in Harrisburg yesterday and, of course, the trial today. So what you got to understand is things that happen in a legal context sometimes sound like they mean a lot more than they actually do.
That.
So, I mean, there's a few things. One is you read a line that said that the state officials do not have direct personal knowledge. That's sort of an important distinction. Because
I would think it was. As I read it, I thought, that sounds like legalese because it doesn't mean that there isn't, but they don't know about it. But that was in other states.
Right.
They do not have direct knowledge
it says they don't,
of anything
right,
in any
but let's
other
remember,
state.
and this is the thing, and I wrote about this online yesterday if anybody wants to take a look at it. I mean, obviously, the stipulation agreement, and what a stipulation agreement is before you go before a judge, the parties on both sides get together and say, here's what we're not going to argue about. Well, not even we're not going to agree necessarily, but we're just not going to argue this. This is stuff we're just going to kind of put, and we're going to say, for purposes of this argument, we're willing to acknowledge this on both sides. You got to remember that the state officials who are defending this law, and this is something the state said in other filings and in other parts of the court record, state officials generally don't have jurisdiction over how elections are carried out. Usually the administration of elections carried out at the county level. So if a county official spots some sort of suspected voter fraud or whatever, then it's really for the county officials to do that. What the state is saying is, yes, there have not been There have not been convictions for this.
Okay.
In their knowledge, but they're not saying that doesn't mean it's never happened.
And there's been no reports, they say.
Well, yeah, but if you look at these other things, what they say is there are a slew of irregularities. This is the state's position. This isn't my position. I'm just saying this is the state's position. There have been a slew of irregularities over the years, cases where vote totals haven't matched up, dead people are on the registration, on voter registration lists and so on and so forth.
That's government malfeasance.
Okay.
That's not voter fraud.
But here's the flip side of it. So what they say is the point of voter ID is to make sure that none of those cases become an opening for fraud to take place. They're not saying fraud has never happened. They're saying that because of the way the system is set up now, it's impossible to say whether fraud has happened.
They're shameless.
And that's why they're doing
I just
voter
want
ID.
to say that they are shameless.
I'm
but
not saying,
how does that not weaken their argument?
Because their argument isn't we've had this huge history of voter fraud. Their argument is we don't have sufficient quality control over our elections for people to have confidence.
In other words, we are incompetent as a government. Consequently, we must burden the citizenry in their right, in their greatest right to
right. And I'm saying it's important for people to understand the distinction, not because I want to make excuses for the administration, but if this ruling doesn't go our way, I think it's important for people to understand why.
But here's the thing. Where ACLU is arguing, I mean, how does a judge just say this? It's a constitutional issue. Is it constitutional under Pennsylvania law?
Right.
So I don't see how any of that has to do with anything.
Yes, that's right.
So none of this doesn't even matter.
Yeah, I mean the question is this a reasonable thing to do given yes. And I am very sure that the ACLU will in its opening arguments and its closing make the point there's not any kind of sufficient track record to show that this has ever happened in Pennsylvania.
But that doesn't mean that it's not.
But that doesn't mean it can't be done. Right, exactly. I mean, that might be a factor. But
okay. Now, one other thing. Do you know this is a judge that decides. This is not a jury trial.
That's correct.
One guy. Do we know who this judge is?
I've forgotten his name, and I haven't really looked up. I mean, remember too that depending on, it's likely that any ruling made here will be appealed.
Is this going to happen in a timely fashion?
Yeah, I mean,
Judge Robert Simpson.
Yeah, so Simpson, Abe.
Hey, God, hope he's no.
So yeah, it's funny how that I guess I was kind of kicking myself yesterday because I had tweeted about this thing and then everybody was oh my God, the state's stipulated. And I just thought. Wow,
you just you had a little bit of a snit because you were way ahead of this story. And no one paid any attention.
No, I didn't really sizzle it either. I mean, I just sort of tweeted it almost as kind of a joke because I thought it was funny. I mean, I don't think anybody has ever seriously thought that there was some massive record of convictions here, right? I mean, did anybody really think that we had this huge number of voter fraud convictions in the state of Pennsylvania on this? No, I mean
this is one of those laws that's been created probably in that ALEC thing, that right wing group in Washington, sent out to state legislatures all over the country, and since 26 of them are totally Republican controlled, you've got these things passing in state after state after state after state. And as we now know, you haven't got voter fraud in any of those states.
Yeah.
Not just Pennsylvania. We ain't exactly squeaky clean. Everybody's squeaky clean in this regard.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that I don't think anybody would say that it's never happened.
Yeah, right. It's never happened.
But are the odds that people are going to be disenfranchised wrongly by this bill far greater than the odds?
Yes, there will be voter fraud.
I also don't think there's any serious question about that either. I mean, one of the things that we have.
So they've just been bald about it.
Are we using bald in a pejorative sense now?
No, you know what? This is one of those things that bothers me, that bald and bold can be used in the same way.
Bold-faced, yes.
I thought it was a bald-faced lie.
Bald-faced lie, yes. I don't know which one.
It is. It's a bald-faced lie.
I guess I'm thinking of the typeface.
Bald means it's, transparent. That's what it means.
Yes. Oh,
don't get so defensive. Bald means... You know, wasn't that guy what was that time when somebody used the word niggardly and was charged with racism and lost their job or something when it's a perfectly good word that doesn't have anything to do with the N-word?
Yeah. But I sure don't use it. Because, Lynn, unlike you, I'm a little sensitive to people. I have compassion.
All right. I have one other legal thing I want to slide in here that might have not passed notice. This is a federal judge.
Yeah.
8th Circuit. That's sitting in godforsaken St. Louis, I believe. Yeah. Has held up or upheld.
Either way, you can't tell these days anymore, can you?
That reminds me of my poor dad when he was in the 60s, when he was trying so hard to sort of go with the flow and stay, well, he wasn't trying that hard, but he was, making some efforts every once in a while to get the new lingo to this and that. And I remember when
painful.
He said, man, that guy was really tight up. And of course we howled and laughed and ridiculed and derided, and I know, right. Okay, so upheld a South Dakota law that mandates, this now is total, this is mandates that doctors must warn women seeking abortions that they will face a higher risk of suicide.
Even though that's not true.
Well, there are studies that say that more women who've had abortions have committed suicide, whether or not there's any causal effect. Yeah. There's also studies that show quite the opposite. Yeah. Whatever. How the hell can that be upheld? First of all, how do you mandate? He was a federal judge? Yes.
Appointed by?
Well,
does it say?
Come on. Who do you think appointed by? I don't know.
Okay.
No, but I mean, come on. That's some right winger. This is what they've done to the federal judiciary.
Yeah, sure.
They put a bunch of,
yahoos.
Well, yeah, the company guys in.
Yeah.
So this is Planned Parenthood had gone after the law, saying that it infringed on the free speech rights of the doctor.
Right.
How does a doctor who doesn't think that that's true, how can he be mandated by the state to tell a woman, okay, baby, I'll let you have this abortion, but, chances are you're going to, hang yourself tomorrow.
Yeah. And I always thought Republicans were against big government interference in medicine.
Well, come on.
Wasn't that the whole Obamacare dispute all about? I mean... But it's okay if you're a pregnant woman. You can basically be.
Remember that old. Speaking of the '60s, our bodies ourselves, not.
Right. That's right.
Ladies.
Every pregnant woman belongs to the state.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay. I have one other thing about ID.
Okay.
Do you see this little item? Pennsylvanians who vote by absentee ballot.
Yes. Yes.
Will need only to provide proof that they have social friggin' security cards.
Right. Yes.
Well, wait a minute.
Right.
Okay, I'm trying to get my head around this. So, anybody can vote without any voter ID, anything, just with a simple social security card.
Right. And
how do they...
Justify that?
Justify.
They don't really.
Yes.
I mean, they just say, "Hey, different rules have always applied." So what do you do? I mean, in fact, we have a story by our very own Lauren Daly in this week's issue that talks about the challenges being faced by people in Pittsburgh, especially. Pittsburgh is woefully behind in terms of getting people registered as compared to Philadelphia, especially, which has a fairly sophisticated operation. One of the people we spoke to is an attorney, a disability rights attorney and activist named Paul O'Hanlon, and he's been going around to nursing homes and encouraging folks to do absentee ballots.
Yeah, that's what I would
precisely because obviously a lot of them are disabled and have a hard time getting the polls in the first place, but also because you don't have to mess around with this stuff. And I guarantee you, if this election is close, what'll happen on November 8th is you'll hear from a lot of Republican people who are saying, "Oh my God, it's absentee voter fraud or whatever." That'll be
well, but that is the way
frontier.
that the Democrats have to get around this. I mean, they've got to. I mean, you want to help people get voter IDs.
Yeah.
But you also want to say to them, hey, but let's right now just get you registered so you can vote absentee. So you can stay at home and not go out and vote and not be required to prove you are who you are with a photo identification, a specific photo ID with a use by date on it or something.
Yeah, although don't you have to? I mean, I've never voted absentee before, but don't you have to sign something that says I can't?
Yeah,
like a
you
sworn
do.
statement that says I can't make it to the polls. I mean,
yes,
that seems,
right. Yes.
I mean, I can understand O'Hanlon doing that in a nursing home is one thing. Is a
well, you might
credible
know
argument
that you're
going to
be gone that day, or it's a and you think they check on that?
No, they don't. But then
they will.
They will.
They'll expand an
we'll have the
entire.
resources
the
of the state.
Will create an entire new
bureaucracy.
Right. To see where were you on November whatever, blah, 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 when you supposedly weren't at home.
And then to follow women after they get abortions to see if they kill themselves or not. These are the types of big government we believe in the GOP, I guess.
God almighty. Okay. So we took care of voter ID. This trial, by the way, is supposed to go on for some
5 or 6 days.
Yeah,
5 or
so
7 days.
that seems odd to me, but what the heck.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think a constitutional argument wouldn't require
15 minutes. Go.
Well, I mean, look at the friggin' Supreme Court.
Yeah, right.
They deigned to give Affordable Care Act 2 days.
Right.
Which amounted to what? 3 hours, 4 hours?
But remember, that's a different argument too, because that had been litigated extensively up through various appeals courts and so on and so forth. So there's already a paper record and written briefs and all that other stuff.
And anyway, all of the justices already had made up their minds, so this was all just a friggin' show.
Now, how can you say that after John Roberts surprised the world?
God bless him, huh? Hey, did you see that Democrats hold him in higher esteem than Republicans?
That's really funny. And my first reaction, I almost called into you. I almost called into you when that ruling came down when you were on the show here, and I almost just called in and said, "John Roberts, good justice."
Yes, right.
Fair-minded man, because we had just been slagging him the day before.
What a great guy. I had to speak to a bunch of Democratic women the next day, and I actually raised my glass and said, I never would thought I would do this, but...
And you'll never do it again.
Yes. To John Roberts said, ladies, now we can all admit it. He's cute, isn't he?
Yeah, I read a book on...
He's good looking.
I read this book by Jeffrey Toobin called, I think, The Nine. And he makes the case fairly... I mean, he doesn't come right out and say it, but he pretty strongly implies that Sandra Day O'Connor had a major crush on him. It's like in a major therm over John Roberts.
Well, they were never on the court together.
No, I think it was just a sort of admiring from afar.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, my brother has met him. He sat in on my brother's class.
Oh my.
Yes, last year.
Wow.
Yeah. There my brother is teaching his class, and all of a sudden, he didn't know. In the doorway is the dean of the law school and the chief justice. And they said, excuse us, but we would just like to sit in. Obviously, the dean felt of all the classes that were going on, the chief justice would be most interested in seeing
that's quite flattering,
Professor Miller in action. So Bill said that, after he sat through it, that he then talked to the students a little bit and took questions from the students. Bill said he said, these guys, you have these, he was the nicest,
he's a
easiest,
very personable guy, apparently.
Personable, not uppity or anything, blah, 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 blah. But that's often the case.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Often the case. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
I've heard Scalia's a great guy. You want to have a beer, you go out with Scalia. You have a lot of fun. Just steer clear of politics.
Yeah.
Talk about pasta. Talk about baseball. You'll have a wonderful time. I've told you that I had a great time with Robert Bork.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah.
Well, you just don't know.
Yeah.
Who have you met that you thought you would hate and you liked? I mean, that you really didn't like because of their politics, and then thought, God, what a nice guy.
I don't know. I'm trying.
Oh, come on! There's got to have been.
I don't know if I'm a hater that way.
Okay, that you thought
because I'm mostly amused by them. I think more.
You're amused?
Very often, yeah.
Well, what if, let's say, you bumped into Dick Cheney? Well, and you found him personable. Wouldn't you be stunned?
No, not really, because I don't think. I guess just because, you sort of work in this realm where you deal with these politicians or whatever, or lawyers, people who sort of have like a professional role or whatever, and are very strong advocates for their point of view. But the pros tend to be able to hang it up, and I guess I've just been around people like that often enough that I guess it just doesn't surprise me.
But doesn't it screw your head up a little bit? Because, I mean, you want to dislike them or dismiss everything they do or say and suggest that it's because they're somehow malevolent or idiots. And then you meet them and they're bright and charming. Right. And so...
But the flip side of that is I know a lot of people on the left who I agree with 100%, but I find completely insufferable.
Oh, God, that's for sure. That is for sure.
So sadly, there's no relationship between...
No, there's not.
Yeah, which is...
But so that's why... So couldn't you be good friends with a right-winger?
I don't know that I could be... I don't know that I could be good friends with somebody who I think is destroying the country my child is going to grow up in. I think I could get along with somebody like that, but I think it would be hard for me to, pal around with, to use the Sarah Palin phrase.
Okay. Trying to think of some others. Well, I don't know. But, yeah, it's... I'll tell you who was awful nice to me. George Wallace.
Really?
Yes.
Well.
He was already stricken. He was in his wheelchair by that point. But what a Southern gentleman.
Oh, I'm sure.
What a charmer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that little weasel. God. I mean, I was just astonished. Oh, well. Okay. All righty, guys. We got to take a break. I think. Right?
Yes. I'm sure.
We do.
Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com or call Lynn at 412-316-3381. Lynn Cullen Live will return in a moment.
Laser Hair and Skin Center has been providing professional, affordable services for over 10 years. Now they're proud to exclusively offer RegenLite acne treatment. RegenLite is an FDA-approved, non-invasive drug, chemical, and pain-free treatment of all grades of acne. With RegenLite, you will experience a 50% improvement in less than 2 weeks, with lasting improvement for up to 12 weeks. Call the Laser Hair and Skin Center today at 412-373-1700 and receive $100 off your first session. Or go to mylaserhair.com for more information and to see their full line of services. The Laser Hair and Skin Center.
Pittsburgh City Paper is now available on your smartphone. Go to citypapermobile.com to read this week's digital issue or search for restaurants, bars, concerts, events, and movies on any portable device. Plus blogs, Lynn Cullen, and Best of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh City Paper available at over 1,700 locations throughout Western Pennsylvania and on the web at pghcitypaper.com and on your smartphone at citypapermobile.com.
Here at the GED Pep Talk Center, we've got a pep talk that can motivate you.
Sometimes things don't always turn out the way you want them to.
You can improve your future. Now get your game face on and take the first step towards a better life. Hurry up. Don't make me repeat myself.
Whatever level of motivation you need, we've got a pep talk for you. Call 1-877-38-YOUR-GED or visit yourged.org for your pep talk and for free classes in your area. GED is a registered trademark of the American Council on Education. Brought to you by Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Now, it's back to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com.
Okay, I said we were going to talk about trials and tribulations, and that brings us to the local trial of going on as we speak. 1 hour into about the, fourth day or something, maybe fourth, fifth day, I don't know. Yeah. The Jordan Miles civil trial. He never got his day in criminal court, but this is his chance to get a win. And again, if he doesn't win this, I will be so flabbergasted. Am I wrong? What is it I'm not getting here? What is it I'm not understanding?
I think I think it's very difficult, I've always felt that there was no chance of any kind of successful criminal prosecution of these cops.
Because of the culture, because you can't get a cop.
I think because the justice system just sort of built into its very DNA is the idea that, especially in a criminal proceeding, you take the words of the police. You give. In fact, we had a guy. This is a year or two back, who emailed me to let me know that he had basically been bounced off of a criminal trial because he admitted that he read City Paper. And the way that played out is he was asked by, it was a criminal trial, and he was asked by the district attorney, by whoever the prosecutor was, do you believe that a police officer's testimony should be given more weight than that of an ordinary citizen? And the guy's answer was not necessarily.
Which is the absolute correct response.
And the prosecutor said, "Why do you think that?" And the guy said, "I'd just been reading this story in City Paper about this police officer, Garrett Brown." Yeah, and not only did they bounce from the jury, apparently they yelled at him. So this happens. This has also happened to one of my coworkers here, who was on who was being in the jury pool for a death penalty case, and was asked what she thought about the death penalty and whether she could apply it, and she said no. And then they sort of debriefed her. She was bounced from the jury, of course, because you have to be willing to answer yes to that question. And again, the prosecutors lectured her about how stupid she was for
reading City Paper.
But for not seeing the wisdom of the death penalty. So at any rate, I think the point of all of that being just that I think the justice system just is not set up.
Yeah.
To do that in that kind of way. It requires jurors to sort of flip. Sort of flip their understanding of how things work.
So I mean, are the officers expected to take the stand?
Yes, I believe that they are.
All three of them.
And they almost absolutely have to. I mean, the one point of agreement here broadly, we've only heard from the plaintiff's side, Jordan Miles' side. But the one thing sort of everybody said, even Nate Harper, the chief of police, whose testimony has largely been friendly to the police officers, said if things happened the way Jordan Miles said that they happened, then there was misconduct. The police officers did wrong.
Okay. So they either have to believe Jordan Miles or they have to. And it seems in that regard, you got three cops and Jordan again. And so he's still now, and even in this trial, taking on, it's 3 against 1. So that even if one of the cops is not necessarily a great witness, the odds are that, not all of them are going to not be somehow sympathetic or seem, like a good guy to a juror. So, there it would seem he's at a disadvantage as well.
Except that, one of the things, and I believe she'll be testifying today, one of the key witnesses here could be a police commander, Rochelle Brackney,
right?
Who apparently who I believe will be testifying today, maybe testifying right now, and apparently from what has sort of been filed in the case and discussed around it, apparently is going to be testifying that these officers, at least I'm not sure if all three of them, but that there have been issues, discipline issues and candor issues with them in the past. So depending on how that testimony goes, you may see something. Now, conversely, you can bet that when the defense does its case, which I guess should be next week, there will be witnesses brought up to raise doubt about some of the things that Jordan Miles said. Apparently, a couple of friends and acquaintances of Jordan Miles are going to testify that he told them, "Yeah, I had a bottle of Mountain Dew," or something like that. Until we hear what that testimony is, of course, it's going to be hard to say. But obviously, I think everybody has to remember, you're hearing now from the one side.
So
of this
if
case.
there was this all-important bottle of Mountain Dew, which he says there wasn't, and the cops say there was, which is the reason they jumped him because they thought he had a gun, right?
Right.
And then they don't somehow keep that bottle as evidence? How would you not keep that bottle as evidence?
One of the things that's interesting.
All these three great cops.
So this is interesting, and Charlie Deitch, our reporter,
because it doesn't exist, guys.
Charlie Deitch, our news editor, who's been covering this trial, noted this on a blog post yesterday. when, they do depositions before they do the trial, these interviews with and Chief Harper was asked months and months ago during the process of taking depositions, should that bottle have been kept as evidence? And he said, yes, it should have been.
Yeah.
He was asked that question again at trial and said, well, even if that bottle had been, the evidence locker doesn't take food items, da-da-da-da-da-da. And all of a sudden it was a lot less, all of a sudden he sounded a lot less, it was a much less categorical assertion this time around.
That is such bull. They can stick any food item in a plastic bag and stick it in. That is unbelievable.
The other thing that's interesting about this, and this was brought up by Miles' attorney, Carrington Lewis, yesterday was, okay, let's say, for the sake of argument, that Jordan Miles had a bottle in his coat pocket. What the officers testified is not just that he had a bottle, but that he was making these sort of furtive movements to conceal, to protect it, to get at it. If that was really a bottle, surely Jordan Miles at least knew it. So if it was Mountain Dew, did it make sense for him to act all shifty-eyed or all shifty and concealing about a bottle of pop?
Okay, and the judge even said, I guess there was trouble asking the question.
Yes, they objected because it was a leading.
The defense was objecting to not the defense. Miles was attorney was objecting.
No, the defense, the police officer's attorney.
So the judge said, here, well, let me ask it. So. Chief Harper, I mean,
in all your years
of experience, if somebody was being attacked, would they take that was a good time to say, hey, man, I really feel thirsty. Yeah. I think I'm going to get. Why would they be going for a swig of Mountain Dew if three big guys are coming at them?
It's an excellent question.
And the judge asked it, which was great.
Right. Well, I think that the judge, and generally from what Charlie has told me and reported, generally Lancaster, this is Judge Gary Lancaster, the federal judge presiding over the trial, has generally tried to kind of cut through. This is even by lawyer standards. There's a lot of back and forth and friction, and he's trying to cut through that to sort of keep the proceeding moving along. I think the other thing that's interesting that happened yesterday, and our coverage has it, and the other media does too. Monica Wooding, who's the neighbor in whose house the police say Jordan Miles was sort of furtively creeping around alongside of, basically just again, as she did when Miles was tried on the charges that were brought against him, just said what the police said was simply not true. They never asked me if I knew him. I never saw him. He was in the back of the wagon being driven away before.
Right. I never saw anybody flitting around my house.
And apparently, nobody was able to make a dent in that testimony yesterday.
Oh, but the dent will be that she knows the family.
Yeah, but she also, then this was interesting, she also knows police. She didn't know these particular officers, but she's not somebody who is generally an anti-cop person. Apparently, she talked with one of the detectives about whether he was related to another detective who had worked in that neighborhood for many years, and they had a kind of a conversation about all that stuff. But the one thing they didn't talk about is, do you know this kid, and is there a reason for him to be in your yard? And she said that conversation did not happen.
And there is also medical evidence that has been brought forth that Jordan Miles is not the same guy he was prior to the attack, that he suffers from some cognitive deficiencies, that he's had brain damage from what they did to him.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
That is the medical claim. Of course, the police officers, attorneys then went and tried to raise questions about that. Miles apparently, when he was signing up for a driver's license, said something like, I don't suffer from dizziness or these other conditions. And they said, oh, well, then he must not have been, this is all trumped up, blah, 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 blah. And,
God almighty.
But yeah, clearly, and I guess even if from the police perspective, from the defense perspective, even if he suffered, lasting medical consequences from this, what the defense is going to say is, hey, he brought it on himself. We identified ourselves as police, and he, and he ran and he acted suspicious, and he brought this on himself. So, Whether you find that a plausible argument or not is something else.
Poor kid.
Yeah.
Here's what we know. He didn't have a record. He was going to his grandmother's house to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And look what happened to him.
He didn't have a gun.
Jesus, God almighty. And if that's not something you slap the cops down about, I don't know what the hell is. Excuse me. All right. Chuck writes.
Okay.
I realize everyone needs a break from Penn State. Even the Post-Gazette took a break from it today, as there's no mention of it on the front page. Whew.
My column's about it today, so maybe hold off, Chuck.
Okay.
I'm picking up
Those
your
who have
copy.
argued to let's wait until all the evidence is in the Penn State scandal might find solace in the report that was hidden below the fold on page B1 of today's PG. I saw it. Mm-hmm. The article states that the Free Report has been corrected 6 times since its original publication. The most important correction being an email originally attributed to Gary Schultz, now corrected and attributed to the legal counsel Wendell Courtney. Wendell Corey, remember him? Wasn't he that sort of funny old 95-year-old guy who pretended to be a professor? There's Rooney, had white hair hanging. Never mind. The email said, I was never aware that Penn State police investigated inappropriate touching in a shower, and that was in 1998. Makes you wonder how many other mistakes are yet to be found and calls into question the integrity of the report, says Chuck, hanging on. Chuck, poor Chuck, whose daughter I believe is at Penn State. What do you think? You think it calls? I mean, it makes you wonder, did they hurry it out for some reason? Why didn't they vet it a little bit better? There shouldn't have been these concerns. Does it change anything, that?
I mean, it clearly changes the case as it applies to Gary Schultz for sure. And if, and I guess one could argue, I mean, most of those 6 changes, as I understand it, were fairly minor factual corrections.
They were minor.
So I think we should just kind of keep that all in perspective. Did they rush it? I mean, look, it's easy to, you got to remember, there were calls for justice, calls for quick remedial action on all of this sort of stuff. Penn State, to its credit, obviously didn't try to muzzle the guy. I mean, he was pretty straight up about where that institution failed. Rightfully so, Schultz will have his day in court to make these very arguments. As Spanier, if he's ever charged, will as well. He's obviously pleading his case pretty assiduously. The Free Report, I think, is an important document. It may not be a perfect document, but as it applies to Schultz and company, I don't think anybody argues that these guys covered themselves with glory, right? I mean, nobody thinks that Graham Spanier really outdid himself as a university administrator. Nobody thinks that.
They all did. They made
nobody thinks of it as Paterno, right? I mean, you may not think Paterno, is culpable in a moral or criminal sense. I mean, I certainly know there are people who believe that. Or that he hasn't
gone from saint to devil.
Right.
I mean,
but what you can say is he's not the guy we thought he was.
No. Or he purported to be.
He's not the man he claimed to be. He's not the man people believe that he would be. I think that's important. I mean, I wrote this week, again, Chuck should just avoid the paper for a day or two, I guess, about the NCAA sanctions today. And, I'm for them. And I'm for, I don't think they're going to make college football, a more reputable enterprise or anything like that. But I think there's really something to be said for, Penn State was supposed to be success with honor, right? That was supposed to be the thing. Well, they didn't really have the honor that they thought they did. And what the NCAA has done has said you didn't really have the success either. And I think it's clearly a symbolic thing. The kids who played for those games know what they did and know what they put out on the field. But I think the institution itself deservedly has taken a strong symbolic blow there. And I think the fines, we can argue about whether they're sufficient or not. But the flip side of that is the NCAA, it's somewhat questionable as to whether the NCAA really had the legal authority to do anything here. So I think they had to kind of balance that with the fact that here's a deal they could get Penn State to sign off on. And
speaking of that, did I hear that Franco Harris was part of a group that is going to challenge the NCAA, saying that they had no right to
What's Franco Harris's standing? He has no standing. Franco Harris is just a guy. He's an alum. He played. He likes Joe Paterno, but he has no standing to complain about it.
Who has standing to complain?
Only the university, I would think. And the university is essentially signed away by doing a consent decree. I don't know. I mean, maybe he'll argue, blah, blah, I'm a taxpayer, and because taxpayer money goes to the school. I mean, he's just a guy. Franco Harris, I mean, I respect the guy, I like him, but he's just a guy with an opinion.
Yeah.
He doesn't, I mean, what basis does he have for complaining about this stuff? Zero.
Because they took his hero away.
Yeah, but you know what? That happens in life.
Yeah. All right, Franco, come on, get it together. Get it together. We love you, but get it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are causes less checkered than this to fight for,
right,
who could benefit from your advocacy and attention.
Well said. And on that note,
let's go to a commercial. Speaking of causes that could benefit from everyone's attention.
More is on the way with Lynn Cullen Live.
Go to bergbargains.com for half-off tickets to The Legend of Zelda, Symphony of the Goddesses at Heinz Hall this Friday. bergbargains.com. Local deals, local merchants. bergbargains.com. Get Lynn Cullen Live on your smartphone. Go to citypapermobile.com now for Pittsburgh City Paper's brand new mobile app. Get the latest restaurant reviews, event listings, movie times, and of course, Lynn Cullen Live on your smartphone. citypapermobile.com.
You're listening to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Once again, here's Lynn Cullen.
Okay.
For those who watch the show...
oh, you're afraid somebody... Oh, yeah.
Lynn just picked a fleck of earphone off of me. It's not that I've got the mange or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
Something's... I don't know what that was. Anyway.
A lot of hosts wouldn't have reached over for that. I appreciate that. That's the kind of
Well, it's like I don't... I want somebody to tell me if I got spinach in my teeth or there's something. I was talking to a woman on the street the other day and there was a bug stuck in her hair. Yeah. And I said, excuse me, you gotta...
Well, and again, for those watching, I did point out before the show that Lynn has these tears in her blouse here today, so she should probably... in case she hadn't noticed. What? Uh-oh.
Do you think it's not appropriate day wear?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay. Or it's not appropriate day wear for an old woman?
No.
Okay.
Old.
Thank you.
Age is nothing but a number, sister.
Yeah, that's what I think, too. Anyway, those shoulders are still in really good shape, aren't they? Yeah. I'm embarrassing him. Okay, I'll stop. I'm an old lady. Yeah. Old ladies get to... This is one of the things I got to tell you. When you get older, you realize you can flirt with no... I know old men do it too, but old women do too. You can flirt with younger people because you can't assume for a minute that they're going to take...
There's probably a limit to how much younger you can do that with and not like if you were doing it to 19-year-old. Yeah.
Cougar Town.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, there's got to be some... Because, listen, when you get to be an old lady, you're not taken seriously in a sexual way.
Sure.
You're not. You become part of the background. You do. So, when older women, like... pick your phone stuff out of virile young men's ears.
Thank you for referring to me as virile, by the way.
Well, I know
we know it was true at least once.
I have seen the
evidence,
the issue of your loins. Okay, I'll stop.
Thank you.
He's so easily made nervous. Honest.
It's on my wife's behalf mostly.
Oh, really? I'm sure Mel is threatened by me. God.
No, I think she's threatened by the word loins.
Gird. How can you ever think of loins without thinking of gird?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, did you hear, I'm sure you didn't subject yourself to it, but I happened to be in the car, and I have satellite, and so I turned on CNN or something, and they were doing Romney's speech to the VFW. You didn't hear it?
No.
Oh, my dear God in heaven.
I heard that he didn't, talk about veterans issues at all.
No, he made Barack Obama sound like a traitor.
Yeah.
I mean, like the most... Here's Maureen Dowd's account. Obama is ashamed of America. An apologist sapping the greatness of a country that is the greatest force for good the world has ever known. A weakling marring the American century by gutting the military and the economy. Blah, 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 blah. No, it was even, no, that doesn't even do it justice. You cannot imagine his tone.
I'll have to check it out.
It was unbelievable. And she said, it's always at this VFW convention that these Republicans just go bonkers. Yeah. And she reminds us that it was the 2002, right after 9/11, vet convention, that Dick Cheney, she said, set the gold standard for mindless belligerence, in which he said the following, quote, "Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction."
Right. Then he came back next year and he said, and when I say no doubt, I mean there is a little bit.
Well, no, there was no doubt among them because they didn't want there to be.
Exactly, yeah, right.
No, there's no doubt because we prefer to have it that way.
I just realized, by the way, that I inadvertently, shamelessly, just now co-opted a line from Monty Python. So if there are fans out there,
and what did you say? What did you say?
When I said there was no doubt, there's a little bit. It's an old joke. It's actually a favorite of my arts editor, Bill O'Driscoll. There's no cannibalism in the British Navy, and when I say there's no cannibalism, I mean there is a little bit. I think that's the line. So I apologize to the Pythons and their fans. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh my God, my God! And speaking of that, who did we hear has flat out announced they've got weapons of mass destruction? Syria. Yeah. So if Dick Cheney were in office, I guess we'd be going in there tomorrow.
Yeah. Or leaving it to Israel, or encouraging Israel to do it, I suppose.
Good Lord in heaven!
And really, what consequences could there be from that? Honestly, I mean, let them have their fun. I think it's funny. I mean, I'm sure we'll see more of this because I think the thing that Team Romney has sort of figured out is, like, okay, they can't really. I mean, all of their proposals are terrible and unpopular. So, and they still have this lingering, because of his history, because he's done moderate things in the past, there's this lingering distrust from him within the base of his own party. But the one thing those folks respond to is just smacking around your enemy. That's what they like. They like just being belligerent. It doesn't even matter what you're saying. It's how you say it.
That's right.
And as long as you say it with as much contempt
that's why you
as
have
you
to
possibly can.
You have to listen to this speech.
I'll definitely.
It is just classic. Okay, we got a bunch of emails in.
All right.
Ray says, "Oh, this is true. Professor Irwin Corey," that's who I was thinking of, and Ray says he should be running Penn State. I think he's dead, though. Well, he should be running Penn State anyway. Okay, Ansel writes, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
But don't you think the NCAA sanctions penalized everyone but the Spanier, Curley, Schultz, Sandusky, and Paterno?
Yes.
Yeah, but they're being left to the criminal courts, aren't they? Oh, no. How did it not? Wait. How did they not? They penalized Paterno. First of all, he's dead.
Right.
They further destroyed his reputation. They took away
he's
the
talking
crown
about
that he
he's
wanted.
talking about the NCAA sanctions specifically.
But those sanctions, by taking the wins away, were directly
they do
Paterno.
of course affect Paterno and his reputation. There's no
Totally.
question. So that's true. I mean, there's an argument by this, and Dave Zirin, who's a sports columnist who I admire quite a bit, was very upset about the NCAA sanctions because he said, "Look, this is a completely extrajudicial. They have no authority here. Their process stunk. They basically just took the free report and just said, this is our basis for it."
That is true. They themselves didn't do much of anything.
I mean, I do. This is sort of a tricky thing to say, I guess. I agree. Obviously, there are plenty of innocent people who are being harmed by this. I mean, I don't know what's the extent of harm to the student body of Penn State if their team doesn't get to go to a bowl game. I mean, it's kind of hard to quantify exactly what that is.
The harm is to little business people at State College.
Well, believe me, people will still be going to Penn State games. I have a feeling that Beaver Stadium will be full up.
I think it'll be full up this year and maybe next year, but after they put on, after they get beaten by everybody and their uncle.
But I think
I don't know.
I think this too, and I tried to say this in the column. Look, when powerful people sin, when they err, The innocent always suffer.
Little people suffer.
And I think this is really important because, part of the NCAA's argument here is like we have to get a grip on the sort of this culture of football. And I tend to sympathize with that argument. And I think, one of the things that probably needs to happen in a place like Penn State is not just that there's change at the top, but that the people at the bottom start to think a little bit too about how they're holding leadership accountable or whatever. And I think it's really, I think hero worship in any form is dangerous. It's bad for democracy.
Obviously.
It's bad for communities, as we've seen here.
Obviously.
Any form of hero worship is bad. And so you should really be careful about who you decide to worship. And I think that's an important lesson. And I think the students at Penn State, if they learn nothing else in 4 years there, or 5 or however many it takes them to get through, learning that lesson, I think, is important, because when they go into the real world, they're going to find out we always pay for the sins of our betters. We're all still paying for, and by betters, I mean up on the social scale rather than a moral sense.
For Richard Nixon!
We're still paying for what Wall Street did. We're still paying for all
we're
these
paying
things.
for, all these mistakes that get made.
Yes.
That's right.
So I agree with that. But you know what? That's life. And I think my hope would be that students recognize that and start in the future to challenge the accepted wisdom and to challenge people in authority more than they do.
I found that speech so moving and brilliant that I think I'm going to worship you.
Good. I'm glad it sunk in then. It's
Okay.
That's another Monty Python skip, but I'll go for it.
Robert writes, Mitt now wants an official investigation of Obama for leaking. Wait, did that come out right?
I don't get it.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, he was really after him for leaking something, which I'd never quite understood.
I thought it was it
had to do with Osama.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever. Well, mostly what Mitt's upset about is that he got Osama.
Right. And he's going to get credit for it.
Obama got Osama.
But
Okay.
wait, how could he have done that when he's a weakling on the
I don't know. See,
stage?
that doesn't go with the narrative, so you got to go to leaking. So listen to this. Here's what Dowd says again about Romney. This thing that people just aren't connecting with him. They don't know who he is. He turns out to be about the most secretive human being that perhaps has ever run for the presidency of the United States. Listen to this. He spent $100,000 in state funds in Massachusetts when he was leaving office to replace all the office computers.
Right.
So that, all the hard drives are gone. He also, listen to this, 11 of his aides bought the hard drives of their state-issued computers to keep. Okay. Have you ever heard of anybody doing this? Okay. Also, before he left office, the governor's staff had emails and other electronic communications by the administration wiped from the state servers. Actually, there's no internal documentation whatsoever of Romney's administration, and
you can see why now, can't you? Because he's trying.
The fact is, hi caller. The fact is, we don't even know if Romney ever was the governor of Massachusetts.
In fact, I think he'd probably try to convince you that he wasn't.
I know. I guess not. Hello, caller.
Hello. George from Moon.
Hi, George.
Hey, George.
Hey, Chris. Just wanted to tell you your thoughts are exactly in parallel to mine that I've been thinking about for the last couple of days with this whole Penn State thing. To think that you're going to get away with the sins of your father is an interesting concept.
Yeah.
I don't quote biblical verse ever, but isn't there somewhere in the Christian Bible it says that the sins of the father shall be visited upon the son?
Yes.
So I'm appealing to those people who accept the Bible as truth and knowledge. But
that sounds like the Jewish Bible. that sounds like our. Speak as a Jew.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where it is. I should have done my research.
George, let me tell you, Jesus would have given them a bull spot.
That's right. That's right. No, I know. Here, Jesus the Son, yes, would have exactly. The Father, the Jews' God, he's one angry, mean son of a bitch. I'm sorry. Oh, that probably.
Well, anyway, I think there's some truth in that. I think we find that in so many ways with generations after slavery and apartheid and everything else that the next generation suffers. We find it after wars. We find it after many human events where the next generation has to suffer through.
That's right.
What was done by the previous.
Look at what our children are going to have to suffer through because of our malfeasance.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. But on the other point, other point you made, Chris, was that this is football.
Yeah.
This is football, and missing a football game or whatever a football program is not earth-shaking things in people's lives.
Yeah.
And if it is, there's something wrong with that culture.
I have to say one of the more disturbing images is these newspaper photos of the students of Penn State learning about the sanctions.
Oh, I know.
And they all look like the towers just fell all over again. It's not our 111 wins, please, Lord, no.
Yeah. And the last point I wanted to make was, in what culture do we see out there in current affairs and in world politics and everything, people who put up memorials and statues of cult figures before they are dead?
Yeah. Mao, Stalin. I mean, that's
Yeah, North Korea, China, the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
So there's something in this football culture in Penn State that has to put up a statue before the guy is even dead and can be properly immortalized.
Yeah.
To put a statue there, and then everybody to go crazy when it's removed temporarily.
That's absolutely true.
That's cult worship, 100%. That's a personality cult going on there.
That's right. Absolutely true. Hey, thanks for the call.
Okay, thank you.
Incidentally, just because he brought it up, I mean, I was also against taking the Paterno statue down.
Yeah.
I thought what they should have done is, so there's the statue of him, and then there's this sort of frieze behind him of
the three
of these football players trying out behind him. I think they should have replaced those with images of kids pleading, and then what you've got is Paterno with his back to them, his eyes fixed on victory, and his finger up in the air. That would have been. That you want to talk about a scar that would keep this thing in people's minds. To simply remove the statue probably isn't enough.
Wow, that was one powerful image. Wow.
I mean,
no,
but it really is, folks. If you're students of Penn State listening to this program, you're going to be fine. Like, it's just a thing in the record book, and it's important that the record book, I think, be changed. It has a symbolic value to it, but your life.
Life will go on.
Not only will it go on,
it might get better.
Be unchanged
That's
as a result
right.
of this.
It'll be fine.
So, take the jaw up off the floor, lift your eyes up. There are broader horizons. I was wondering something,
and I'd like I don't know, it was what scientists studies this kind of thing, but those pictures of people watching, many of them, so the mouth drops, open, and in a lot of instances, the hands come up on the face. I want to know what evolutionary thing is afoot in that all of that is how we express shock. Mouth open, hands off.
Is that how every culture does it? Some of those things are...
I don't know. I don't know, but it sure was. You couldn't... I mean, there were so many... I wonder what that's about.
Yeah, I don't either.
Okay, but inquiring mind.
I'll look into
want to know. You look it up.
Alrighty.
Thank you very much. It was very nice to have you here today. You were
we're done.
A brilliant scholar and a hunk.
I'll tell you what. I'm coming in festooned with headphone detritus every week from here on out.
He's got very nice earlobes. All right, I'm off to the Pirate game.
Have a good time.
Woo, they damn well better turn this around. They're losing. They're losing. 2 in a row. They're 2.5 out. Jesus.
Come on, pull yourself together.
Go Bucks. See you tomorrow.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.